Hi guys, welcome to another episode of We All Have a Story. And thank you for being here, and I appreciate you listening. I appreciate anyone who's come back a second time. If you can handle my story a second time, well then maybe it is somewhat interesting. So once again, a reminder that these particular videos that I do, the videos about my life and the story of my life, are being done for the sake of my children and grandchildren and progeny. Yeah. So it's being done for the sake of them. And forgive me, I do not have a full face of makeup on today, so I probably look not as nice as I normally do, but it's late and I didn't feel like putting the rest of my makeup on. Oh, and of course I have to introduce my co-host, which is Rocky. He is always with me, and he says hello, hello, hello. He'll be down here trying to destroy my video, do everything he can to knock over my camera or whatever it is that I'm trying to do. But he's here, and if you see me fiddling in my lap, it's me fiddling with my co-host, petting his head and all that good stuff. So today I thought I would continue on with my story, and I left off at, well, I think the last thing I was talking about was my trips to Merrimack Caverns every year for our family reunion as a child. That went on, well, until we went to move to Colorado after my dad went in the military. So I would assume that, till I was about 7, and I know they continued on after we left, and they eventually moved to a different location, which I never liked as much. I don't know why, maybe the price was too high or something, but it was just kind of sad that it was no longer at Merrimack Caverns. But so, I remember I was listening to my last video and I had started talking about my dogs, and then I got distracted on another rabbit trail of thought, and so I ended up not talking about my dogs. And maybe it's not going to be a very interesting story, but there are a number of stories about my animals that I grew up with. So I grew up with 3 animals. Well, the early parts of my childhood, I grew up with 3 animals. Gretchen, Muttley were 2 dogs, and then Putterhead was our cat. Putterhead was a Siamese cat, much like my Siamese Putty. And my dad hated him. I have no idea what happened to Putterhead when we moved to Colorado. It wouldn't surprise me if Putterhead got put outside and got left there. I don't know what happened to him, but anyway, he didn't come with us to Colorado, and I never saw him again. And I'm really surprised that didn't affect me more than it did. But it didn't. I don't remember it affecting me at all, actually. So there wasn't a whole lot of stories about Putterhead, except for the fact that my dad hated him. And there were a couple times when my dad, took him by the neck and by the butt and threw him outside because he was mad at him for scratching on the carpet or whatever. And I was pretty sad about the treatment of the kitty, but he survived it, I guess. Like I said, I don't know what happened to him. But Gretchen and Muttley were interesting characters in the story of my life, because there were a number of stories about them. So Gretchen was a black lab, and I remember the day we got Gretchen. We were down at a base, but my brother was having a little league game, or I guess little league probably, baseball game, and I guess my mother or maybe my dad, might have been my dad, showed up with this dog and said that it was Shannon, my brother's dog. My brother's name is, he goes by Mike, but his name is Michael Shannon, so we called him Shannon. So we showed up with Gretchen, and this big black lab, happy-go-lucky like labs are. And then the other dog was Muttley, and Muttley was what I assume to be, well, she's obviously a mixed breed, but I'm pretty sure she was probably mixed with Cocker Spaniel, because she had this kind of the general shape of a Cocker Spaniel with the long furry ears, and she was fatter and shorter than a Cocker Spaniel. So, but she wasn't the color of a Cocker Spaniel at all. She was mostly white with big, like, tan spots. Yeah, just like that, with big tan spots. And I think her ears were that tan color. Yeah, they were. Her ears were that tan color as well. She was a sweet little girl. The earliest memory I have of her is she had puppies. And I remember her being a very protective mom of her puppies. And the only memories of her Well, okay. So she was in Missouri in the 80s, small town Missouri. You know, dogs weren't kept in. You know, our dogs, I can't remember a time that our dogs were ever inside the house. And so they kind of roamed the neighborhood, and everybody knew everybody else's dogs, and it wasn't such a big deal. But I know Muttley, being the little dog she was a heavy dog, but she was a little dog. Um, I would say she probably weighed about, I don't know, 25 pounds or so, but maybe 30. But anyway, she'd come home beat up, but kind of proud, you know, because I suspect that she was beaten up on some dog and probably won. Just took some battle wounds along the way. That's about the only real story of her, except for the story of later on, which I'll tell in a minute. I may as well tell it now. So when we moved to Colorado, we left Muttley with the across the street neighbor. They kept her. And then after my dad married his second wife, and we were visiting Missouri, she stole Muttley from the neighbor's yard. And we took Muttley to Colorado with us and ended up giving Muttley to a friend, a military friend of my dad's, where I suspect that she lived until she died, I hope. So that was kind of the story of Muttley. She was our dog. We gave her away when we moved to Colorado. My dad divorced my mother, married this other woman, and we were visiting, and Muttley was still alive, and we went and picked Muttley up and brought her to Colorado, stole her from the neighbor. So that was the story of Muttley. Gretchen was a pretty interesting character. So we lived in what looked like a rancher home from the street, but down below was a basement that you couldn't really see from the street. You had to go around the side of the house to notice that there was a basement. And the basement had a walkout in the backyard. But you know, this was the 1970s, 1980s, and so the doors were made of solid wood, especially the basement door. And so, you know, it was very humid in Missouri, and wooden doors tend to swell, especially basement doors that were maybe if there's water on the floor coming in from the outside or whatever. So Gretchen was deathly afraid of lightning, and given the fact that our dogs are never allowed inside, if there was a lightning storm, you'd be in bed at night and you'd hear this bang, and you just hear this bang, 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 bang. And so our basement door was really hard for us. I mean, as a kid, we'd have to kick and throw our body against it to get that door to open. But Gretchen did the same thing. If she wanted to come in the basement, she was going to get that door open, and she wouldn't stop. You'd hear in the middle of the night, I'd hear my dad screaming out, because the basement door was just below my dad's bedroom window, my mother's bedroom window. And I'd hear my dad yelling out the window to Gretchen to stop it, and of course she didn't. And I do remember that one time, pretty sure it was Gretchen, we had a pretty good sized window down there in that basement that was kind of right at ground level. And I'm pretty sure it was Gretchen. It could have been Muttley, but I think it was Gretchen that shattered the window because she couldn't get the door open, so she came in through the window. She was, she was a neat dog. So now what happened with her when we moved to Colorado, now my dad tells me this didn't happen, but I'm pretty sure that at one time in my adulthood, my dad did tell me that this happened. But I had always been told that they gave her away to some farmer. But I feel like I've been told a different story by my mother, and of course my mother would have said this because it would have made my dad look bad, and that's all she really wanted to do was make him look bad. But I feel like Dad confirmed that story at some point. But the story that I think possibly happened to Gretchen was they just took her out in the woods and dumped her, which breaks my heart. But the funny thing is, I think the second time, I don't know. You know, I was young. When we moved to Colorado, I was 7, I believe, 2nd grade. And so I wasn't involved in any of that. Any of that stuff would have been taking place, not with, you know, me around. But we had moved to Colorado, and then when my parents split up, we moved back. And then I remember getting Gretchen back when we came back from Colorado for a period of time. But I don't think it was a permanent period of time because she wasn't there later. So I don't know. Being a young child, I don't know what happened. But those are my dog animals growing up. Gretchen, Muttley, and Pooterhead. And Gretchen was probably the biggest memory just because she, you know, was so funny busting into our house to get into the basement. Of course, you know, she could never make it into the actual house. Like I said, I cannot remember a time when those dogs were ever inside the actual house part of the house. They probably never were. Same thing with, you know, my grandpa never let dogs in the house. And, you know, it's just how it was back in those days. People didn't, well, especially small town people, and the animals were kept outside. So, I don't know where, I guess what I was thinking of where I could go next is just talking about my favorite cousins growing up prior to moving to Colorado. Because like I said, the move to Colorado was the turning point in my childhood in many different ways. You know, once we moved there, I didn't have any contact with my cousins, or very minimal contact. I think we'll talk about that later. But my favorite cousins growing up. So my dad had 2 brothers. One brother had 3 boys that were all older than me, and his younger brother had a daughter that was younger than me. She was the youngest of those grandkids. And then my mother only had a sister, and her sister only had 1 child. My mother did have a half brother, but I didn't even know that until later in life, and I've certainly never met him. I don't even know if he's still alive. He's probably not. And here I go with the cat hair again. Thanks, Rocky. Always keeping me well supplied in cat hair. So my favorite cousins growing up were Crystal and Mike. Crystal actually was my second cousin. She was my dad's cousin's daughter. And she was older than me. She was about my brother's age. Real close in age to my brother. My brother's just short of 3 years older than me. And then Mike, who was also older than me, about the same age as my brother. Everyone's always about my brother's age. Everyone was born in like the 72, 73 year, and the straggler was me, and my younger cousin who was born, she was a number of years younger than me. She was still born in the 70s, I'm pretty sure. Maybe right at 1980. She might have been born in 1980. But, so Crystal was my dad's cousin's daughter. And we just had so much, especially going to Merrimack Cavern. Since she was my dad's family, she would come to the family reunions too when they lived in the area. And it was just, man, we had such good times with her. Now Mike, my mother's nephew, being my only cousin on that side of the family, they lived in Missouri for a period of time too. I think Kirkwood or Arnold or someplace like that. And we'd go up there, and they lived on a property that was like a horse property. And, you know, that was a big deal for us, because even though we were small town people, we weren't country people. You know, we lived in a subdivision, and you know, there weren't horses around where we lived. So it was kind of cool to go up there, and she had at least 1 horse, maybe 2. And the stories of, you know, they had a big barn, and me and Mike and my brother, which my brother's name is Mike too. That's why they called him Shannon, because there were already like 2 Mikes in the family. So we would go play in the barn, and it was just, I remember there were spiders, and it, you know, of course it was so weird because there were bugs and spiders and stuff, but we'd go up in the loft. They had a loft area, and you could sit up in the loft and dangle your feet down. And the boys, my brother and my cousin, would spit loogies over into the hay. And I remember being so disgusted by that. But, you know, of course, I wanted to be part of the crowd, so I didn't say anything. I was just really disgusted. And, of course, I didn't take part in it. Of course, as a girl, you know, I never learned how to do that. And then I remember one time we were at their house. You know, one of the horses was a male. And I remember my brother looks over, and I'm younger than him, so I don't know what's going on either, but I remember he's like, "Mom, there's something coming out of the horse." Well, it was the horse's part that was coming out. And he was just horrified that something was terribly wrong with this horse. And then another cool thing about going to Mike's house is in his bedroom, his dad, or I think it was his stepdad, had cut out a secret room, which I think used to be like an old air duct that he kind of turned into a little secret room. And so, you know, the opening to the secret room was about like this, you know, the size of the old air duct. And so, and he'd covered up with a pillow, and so you wouldn't know it was there. And we'd go and play Legos and stuff in that little secret room. They put a light in there and everything. It was just a tiny little room, and I don't even know if you could stand up all the way in the room. But so that was a lot of fun. And oh, I was gonna show you. Well, anyway, my cousin Mike had a dog named Kizzy, which I barely remember Kizzy, but Kizzy died in very mysterious circumstances, and it really broke my cousin's heart. They think the dog got poisoned, and he was just brokenhearted. Well, he had this little stuffed animal. It was a little dog, and he named it Kizzy, and he gave it to me. And to this day, I can go grab it right now out of my bedroom. It's sitting on my nightstand or on my dresser. I still have Kizzy to this day. I haven't seen my cousin Mike in probably 20 years, and I suspect I'll never see him again. But I still have it to this day. And so what I loved about Mike was he was older, but he never treated me like he was older. You know, a lot of times when you have the older cousins, they treat the younger cousins differently, or they'll hang out with with my brother who was his age and just kind of, you know, shove me off. But he was always really good to both of us, and never treated any one of us like we were better or lesser than or whatever. And his mom, my Aunt Susie, was very much a hippie type, which was different from my family because we were very conservative Christians. And but she was super sweet, never had, and it was always good to us. And so maybe that has to do with why Mike was so good. And plus he was an only child, so he was probably craving attention and was happy to get it from both of us. So, you know, we would just cut up and make, you know, and laugh, and just, we would play records, and we'd make up alternate lyrics to the music, and we'd have such a good time. Just so much fun with Mike. And then with Crystal, we didn't have the fun with her that we did with Mike, but you know, we talked, I don't know, it was just a different kind of relationship. But we would sit in front of the stereo and listen to Alabama music, because we were country music, and just sing at the top of our lungs with all three of us, you know, singing. And we'd go downstairs in their basement and play board games. And, you know, we just had a good time, especially at the family reunions. We'd run around together. And Crystal, being older too, she also treated me like I was equal, you know, even though she was a couple years older. And, you know, it was a little different with the three cousins from my dad's older brother. They were all older than me. I think one of them was about the same age as my brother. I think the youngest was. And they would play with us, but, you know, I me being the younger and, you know, fatter child, I always got put in the worst. You know, if we played cops and robbers, you know, I would always be the robber and the cops would always catch me. Or they would be the robber and I would be the cop that couldn't catch the robber because they were all boys and they were faster and not as overweight as I was. So, you know, and of course the oldest one of them was a good 5-6 years older than me. And so he was always too much older to really play with us. And then my younger cousin from my dad's younger brother, she was quite a bit younger than me. I think she probably was born in 1980, which is about 5 years younger than me. And I never was a big fan of her. She was an only child too, and she's kind of spoiled. So, you know, I mean, I tried to be good to her when she was around, but she was also spoiled by my grandma. She was the youngest grandchild, and my grandma spoiled her, oh, like you wouldn't believe. So she was not the most pleasant to be around because of that. But she wasn't terrible, you know, she could have been worse. So those were my cousins and my childhood animals. And if you saw my recent short, I do have a dog that's injured right now. And if you've made it this far in the video, I'm showing the analytics that most people don't make it this far. But if you've made it this far, it'd be really cool if you comment and let me know, hey, I made it that far. And yes, I will be praying for Duke. Duke is injured. Dogs were fighting out in the backyard yesterday, and I don't know who started what, and I don't know who was involved in the fight, but I know Duke is the only one that came out injured. And so I was thinking maybe he was just kind of, because Duke is an interesting character. He tends to, well, we're almost at 20 minutes, so I won't go into the story of Duke right now, but he's an interesting character. And I felt like it's possible that he probably just was playing up his injuries for sympathy, but then, you know, maybe not. So I probably am going to need to get him to a vet, but I'm not going to be able to do it over the weekend. So I'm probably going to have to do it sometime next week. And so I pray that you will please pray for Duke, that he will be okay until I can get him to a vet, and that the vet bill won't be crazy expensive, because I don't have a lot of money right now. And if he needs surgery, that's going to be multi-thousands of dollars. So please pray for Duke if you're still listening. And if you are still listening and you like my content even in the least and want to hear some more of it, it would help me out so much in so many ways. You just don't know. You don't know how nice it is to see new subscribers. And if you would just subscribe and like my video. You know, I feel uncomfortable telling you to share it, because I feel like my content isn't something that just your random people on Facebook would want to listen to. But if you feel like sharing it, that would be awesome. I would really appreciate it. So like, share, and subscribe. That would be so nice, and I would appreciate it. And until the next video, I hope you all are doing well. I hope nobody who is listening to this right now is in an abusive relationship in any kind of way. And if you are, I pray that you get out of it, if you have the strength and the ability and the resources to do so. So if you want to share your story with me, contact me, comment below, and you know, I would like to read your story, because your story is just as important as mine. So until next time, God bless, and I hope you know my ugly, unmakeup face didn't scare you too much this time. Bye-bye.